We've been speaking with top economists and organizational experts to better understand how the U.S. is going to get back to the office post-pandemic. Today, I'm speaking with Rachel Lipson. She's the founding director of the Project on Workforce at Harvard University. Thanks so much for meeting with me.
Thanks for having me. Great to chat with you today.
So broadly, what do you see as the future of work as we get back to the office post-pandemic?
I'm watching a few big trends at this particular moment when it's with respect to the future of work. The first is what's going to be the final share of remote and hybrid work. The second is I think there's a fundamental rethinking in this moment of kind of the connection between education and work, and what does it look like to create transitions from our education system into good jobs? The future of work in a lot of ways is dependent on the future of education and how it adapts to changing worker preferences, changing demographics, and a growing share of adult learners who have a lot of other things going on in their life and are wondering whether the education system is going to shift and adapt to catch up to them. A third final area that I'm watching with respect to the future of work is just the ways in which technology is changing the types of jobs and roles that are available. So a huge challenge for the country is going to be whether we can kind of create systems that allow people to change roles, sectors, industries more easily and more smoothly to kind of grow with technology rather than being left behind by it.
You've touched on this a little bit, but so what's wrong with the U.S. job training program that we have right now, and what do you think will fix it?
Our job training infrastructure is kind of stuck in the 1960s. We have a system that was designed for manufacturing jobs and a lot of sort of field trades and work that is kind of manual in nature. And we created a bunch of pretty good systems that were set up to train people for those types of roles. But the structures that you have for those types of jobs are not necessarily easily replicable in growing industries like healthcare or technology. Industries like manufacturing, we have great apprenticeship programs and work-based learning opportunities where people can be working and make money and learn on the job. In most other fields, we have not created structured pipelines that allow you to be in these types of paid on-the-job experiences. So that's one struggle for the US on this front. The second is that we've basically underinvested in this whole area. So the vast majority of US spending on education happens before the age of 22. We spend a tiny share, a fraction of the dollars that we spend on young people on adults. The US ranks second to last in all of OECD on active labor market policies, which are the types of spending that helps stimulate employment, invest in job training, job search support. This is something we just have, over the last few decades, completely neglected in a lot of ways. I think a third factor that contributes here is that historically our primary source of job training in the US has been the community college system. That is the most important institution. And again, relative to four-year institutions, we have decided to basically give less money to institutions that are actually serving a harder to serve population of working parents, older learners, more students of color. And I think if we were to rethink how we think about job training in this country, at the first level, it's really going to require a fundamental investment and scaling of programs through our community college systems, and hopefully working alongside those institutions and employers to update our programs so that they actually match where the current demands in the economy are. I don't know if this resonates for you, but even in my educational experience, it wasn't such a nice, smooth linkage between what you learned in the classroom and then actually getting into career and getting into a job. And I think there's a lot that the U.S. can learn from other countries.
Which industries do you expect to grow in the next 10 years, and which do you think will shrink?
Really focused on healthcare right now. I think there's going to be a fundamental rethinking for some of these healthcare roles on how do we increase job quality and then also simultaneously increase upward mobility pathways. So how do you actually make it so people in healthcare who start off in some of these entry-level and lower paying roles can actually access a ladder to getting into a higher paid, better jobs? A second big sector and focus for the US will be IT or technology. A lot of the research that we're seeing at Harvard, in particular my colleague David Deming, who is a co-director on the faculty side of the Project on Workforce, he emphasizes that at the same time we train for technology skills, we also need to be training for social skills. So there's a huge growing focus on communication, teamwork, resilience, adaptability. These are the types of things that can't be replaced by technology. And so even for roles in the tech sector that require significant technical skills, we're also going to see a growing demand for workers who really have these kind of human social skills and can kind of pair the two.
You cited that 90% of the work that used to be done by humans is now done by machines. So that's the advance of potentially AI. So where do you see jobs growing in the next 20 years with the incorporation of technology? And do you think that we have earned a UBI?
You know, I actually use that 90% of jobs that were used to be done by humans can now be done by machines as a sign that we shouldn't be as worried as some are that the robots are taking over, which is to say that, you know, technology has changed over the course of US history consistently, and human jobs have changed with it, alongside it. So one job might be lost, but we can create a new job that actually is alongside the technology. So no one is driving around in horse and buggies anymore, but the technology around the subway is not that it runs by itself. You need humans that maintain and support and grow the technology and manage it. So I think that's all to say that what's going to be important for the US economy over the coming decades is, as we invest in technology and AI grows and we see returns to machine learning and automation, I think there will be lots of new human jobs that grow alongside that technology. The question is whether we're going to sufficiently invest in education and in people so that they can keep up with the changes and benefit equitably and grow with it. So to me, that's the biggest challenge, because the types of jobs that this new technology is going to create are going to require significant post-secondary education and training. And we need to scale up our ability to have more people have access to the learning that they need, whether in traditional education systems or actually on the job, learning alongside the technology as it's deployed in work. I'm optimistic about our ability to do so. And I think if we can do it well, UBI won't be required, and there will potentially be other and better ways to spend that money to support some of the workers who have been most adversely affected by technological change.
So as you're talking about these soft skills, and in the wake of the Black Lives Matter movement, how do we fight discrimination when hiring, looking for these social skills?
We know that our hiring systems to date have been completely embedded with discriminatory practices. And so when we've left the assessment of soft skills to humans or to often biased assessment tests, the results have not been good. I actually do think that there is a big role for technology here, if done thoughtfully, to help level the playing field, open the aperture to millions of new workers who might have historically been overlooked if you only relied on network-based hiring of who do you know and who has a degree from your university. So I'm encouraged with some caution about the ability of new hiring platforms and new hiring tools to expand the aperture. What we just need to be careful about, and my colleague Joe Fuller actually has some new work on this called Hidden Workers, is how do we ensure that AI isn't used to actually cut out people from consideration through things like, do they have a gap in their resume? Do they have a college degree? For some jobs, those types of AI filters automatically remove from consideration hundreds or thousands of potential diverse workers who can enter a company's pipeline.
As you're talking about diversity in hiring, it's also about diversity in retaining employees. So how can we create a better, flexible work environment for people whose jobs rely on in-person activities?
I think there's a few areas I would think about. The first for in-person work is availability of childcare. And this is going to be an issue that cuts across sectors. So I don't think the private sector alone is going to solve it. Government has to be part of the answer here. But we're going to need collaboration across the firms that employ parents, or caregivers of other family members, but particularly for parents, we're going to need government to help on the funding side, and then collaboration as well with the providers who are also struggling to find enough workers to fill key childcare roles at this moment. A second is just around flexible work scheduling and how do we enable more amenable patterns for people to tap into so that they can actually have schedules that allow them to fulfill their child caring responsibilities. And then a third area I think that relates is just going to be around commuting and transit times. So again, it's not just the workday. If you're a working parent and you add 2 hours on both directions for your commute, that's a huge factor that remote work has illuminated for people of how much more time you can spend with your family if you remove the commute from the equation. So I think it's a call for investment in public transportation and better transit infrastructure.
Would our economy be able to function if, let's say, we move to a mostly flexible or mostly remote work environment?
I don't think we're there yet in terms of being in a mostly remote environment, but I think that there are a lot of positive signs from the remote work experiment of the last year and a half that make me pretty bullish on hybrid work. That said, we really need to be concerned on these and keep a close eye on these equity questions of who benefits and who loses. How do we equalize the playing field when people might have stronger returns to being in person depending on their race or class or gender? And we want to make sure that that doesn't affect advancement patterns or retention patterns. So really would be strongly encouraging firms to keep close data, survey your workers, really watch out for those hiccups. But at the end of the day, if workers have said this is what we want, and there's strong signs that they can be equally productive in a working from home some number of days a week, I think it's a win for American workers if they're able to improve their quality of life in significant ways. The final thing that would say though is there are some concerns about what's lost from innovation and creativity and teamwork. And a huge open question right now that I don't think research has fully answered is how do we kind of replicate in an online setting some of the magic that happens when people are together in a room, in an office space, trading ideas around, socializing, stopping in. All of those kinds of informal social activities have high returns to creating big and better ideas and innovation in the economy. And I think there's been a lot of positive developments on how technology has adapted during this time to allow people to collaborate in an online setting, but we haven't really been able to prove yet whether it is fully capable of providing that kind of human interaction, the magic of social skills and teamwork that we would see in in-person settings.